Welcome to the channel. If epic sci-fi stories are your thing, you've just found your new home. Subscribe, like, and share the adventure. The screaming started at 0300 hours. Ship time. Cadet Alex Morgan had been dreaming of Earth's oceans when the emergency klaxons tore through the dormitory halls of the Galactic Naval Academy. Around him, cadets from 17 different species scrambled in panic, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony of terror that pierced even the reinforced hull of Station Omega. All cadets to emergency stations. The voice belonged to Commander Vex, a towering Altarian whose 4 arms were already gesturing frantically at the holographic displays. This is not a drill. Alex rolled from his bunk, his human reflexes surprisingly quick compared to his alien classmates. While the crystalline Zelrites struggled to orient their geometrical forms and the gas-dwelling Nephians fought to maintain cohesion in the station's atmosphere, Alex was already pulling on his uniform. The viewing ports revealed the horror outside. 3 massive vessels hung in the void, each one larger than the Academy station itself. They were jet black, absorbing light rather than reflecting it, and their surfaces rippled with an energy that made Alex's eyes water to look upon directly. The Devourers had found them. How? Whispered Kira, Alex's steady partner, a gentle, moth-like creature from the Outer Rim whose species had fled their homeworld only cycles ago. The Academy is supposed to be hidden, protected. Alex didn't answer. He was staring at the tactical display, watching as smaller craft detached from the Devourer ships like spores from a dying fungus. The numbers were overwhelming. Thousands of attack vessels, each one capable of reducing a city to ash. The Academy's defense grid activated, sending streams of plasma fire toward the approaching enemy. The weapons struck the dark hulls and simply vanished, absorbed into that impossible black surface. Not even a scorch mark remained. Cadet Morgan. Commander Vex's voice cut through the chaos. Report to Base 7 immediately. Sir? Alex turned, confused. Base 7 was restricted. Only senior officers had access. Now, Cadet, the corridors were filled with fleeing personnel. Alex pushed through crowds of panicking beings, noting how many different species called this academy home. Aquatic dolphins. In mobile water suits, energy-based lumens flickering with anxiety, the proud warrior caste Caraxians gripping their ceremonial weapons, despite knowing how useless they would be. All of them were about to die. Bay 7 was nearly empty when Alex arrived. Only Commander Vex waited, standing beside a small, unremarkable shuttle. The Altarian's usually stern expression had softened into something Alex had never seen before, fear mixed with desperate hope. Sir, I don't understand. The Devourers have found us because of you, Cadet Morgan. Vex's 4 hands moved in the complex gestures of his people's sign of mourning. Your species emits a psychic signature unlike any other. They track it across star systems. Alex felt the blood drain from his face. I'm the reason they're here. You are the reason they hunt. Vex activated the shuttle systems. But you may also be the only one who can stop them. The station shuddered as the first Devourer attack craft reached the outer hull. Through the bay's atmospheric shield, Alex could see the dark shapes moving with predatory grace, their weapons charging with malevolent light. Every great bond starts with a single moment of courage. HFY Chronicle Stories is just beginning, and your support matters. If you love emotional sci-fi tales, forbidden connections, and stories that stay with you, hit subscribe. It's free, and it helps us bring more stories from the stars to you. Get in the shuttle, Cadet. There's something you need to see. Something that will explain why your people are both the galaxy's greatest threat and its only hope. The first explosions began to rock the station as Alex stepped into the small craft, his mind reeling with questions. Behind them, the Academy, home to thousands of young beings from across the galaxy, was beginning to die. And it was all because of what humanity represented to the darkness between the stars. The shuttle's engines hummed with desperate urgency as Commander Vex piloted them away from the dying academy. Alex pressed his face against the viewport, watching in horror as the massive station, larger than most moons, cracked under the Devourer's assault. "Where are we going?" Alex asked, his voice barely audible over the growing sound of the ship's straining systems. "To the archive," Vex replied, his four hands dancing across the controls with practiced precision. "To show you what the Council has hidden from your species for 300 years. The shuttle dove toward the nearest planet, a barren world of crystalline formations and ancient ruins. Alex had never seen it before. It wasn't on any of the Academy's star charts. As they descended through the thin atmosphere, he could make out structures that defied explanation, towers that spiraled impossibly high, bridges that seemed to hang in midair without support, and at the center of it all, a perfect black sphere that reflected nothing. The Veth homeworld, Vex explained as they landed near the sphere. They were the first species the Devourers consumed. But before they died, they left us a warning. The surface was eerily quiet. No wind, no sound except their footsteps on the crystalline ground. The black sphere loomed before them, easily 300 meters in diameter, its surface so perfectly smooth it seemed to bend light around it. "Commander," Alex said, stopping short, "what aren't you telling me?" Vex turned to face him, and Alex saw something in the alien's expression that chilled him, guilt, ancient and profound. "The Devourers don't hunt randomly, Cadet. They follow a pattern. A genetic signature that appears in only one species every few million years." "What signature?" "The capacity for true empathy." Vex placed one of his hands on the sphere, and it began to glow with soft, pulsing light. "Most species develop sympathy. They understand pain when they see it. Some develop compassion. They act to reduce suffering when convenient. But true empathy, the ability to feel another being's pain as if it were your own, regardless of species, regardless of cost, that is extraordinarily rare." The sphere opened, revealing a chamber filled with floating holographic displays. Data streams flowed through the air like living things, and at the center of it all, a massive tree-like structure showing the evolutionary paths of thousands of species. "The Veth had it," Vex continued, guiding Alex inside. "So did the Mordani, the celestial whales of Andromeda, and the singing crystals of the Magellanic clouds. All gone now, all consumed." Alex stared at the displays, beginning to understand. "And humans? Your species doesn't just possess empathy, you weaponize it." Vex activated a recording, and suddenly they were surrounded by images from Earth's history. Humans caring for wounded animals, adopting orphan children from other cultures, risking their lives to save strangers. You extend your protective instincts to beings you've never met, species you've never encountered. It's unprecedented. But why would that make us a threat? The recording shifted, showing the first human explorers making contact with alien species. Each encounter was the same. Within days, humans were integrating with alien cultures, learning their languages, adopting their customs, forming bonds that transcended biological differences. "Because you don't just coexist with other species," Vex said quietly. "You elevate them. Every species that has significant contact with humans begins to develop enhanced empathy themselves. You're contagious." Alex felt a chill run down his spine. "And the Devourers? They are the antithesis of empathy. They consume. Sentient beings not for sustenance, but because consciousness itself, the ability to suffer, to feel, is what they feed on. They exist in the spaces between galaxies, waiting for empathic species to evolve. Then they harvest entire star systems." The chamber filled with tactical displays showing Devourer movements across the galaxy. Red lines traced their paths from one dead system to another, each one marking the extinction of an entire civilization. "They've been hunting your species since you first left Earth. Every human ship that ventures into deep space draws them closer. And now," Vex gestured toward the tactical display, where hundreds of Devourer vessels were converging on human space. "They're coming in force. How many?" Alex asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Enough to consume every human world in the galaxy. Every colony, every station, every ship." Vex's voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. "Your entire species will be extinct within 1 standard year." Alex stared at the flowing data, trying to process what he was seeing. Billions of human lives, all because of a trait that his species considered their greatest strength. "There has to be a way to stop them," he said. "There is." Vex activated. Another display, showing the interior structure of a Devourer ship. But it requires a sacrifice that no empathic species has ever been willing to make. The display zoomed in on what looked like a heart of darkness at the center of each vessel, a pulsing core that seemed to devour light itself. The Veth discovered it just before their extinction. The Devourers have a weakness, but exploiting it means becoming the very thing you empathize with, becoming them. Alex studied the alien script flowing across the displays, the weight of an impossible choice settling on his shoulders. Outside, the shuttle's sensors were detecting new arrivals in the system. The Devourers had found them again. The Archive's warning systems blazed to life as 3 Devourer scout ships materialized in the planet's upper atmosphere. Alex watched through the sphere's transparent walls as the dark vessels descended like falling stars, their hulls absorbing the light of the distant sun. "They're tracking you," Vex said, his 4 hands moving frantically over the Archive's controls. "Your empathic signature is like a beacon to them." "Then I'll leave," Alex said, turning toward the exit. "Draw them away from." "No." Vex's voice carried an authority that stopped Alex in his tracks. "Running only delays the inevitable. If you want to save your species, you need to understand what the Veth learned." The Archive's holographic displays shifted, showing the final days of the Veth civilization. Alex watched in horror as the beautiful crystalline cities were consumed by waves of darkness, their inhabitants simply vanishing into the void. "The Veth were pacifists," Vex explained. "They refused to fight, even when extinction was certain. But their greatest scientist, a being named Kelver, discovered something about the Devourers in those final hours." The display focused on a single Veth, its crystalline form glowing with desperate determination as it worked at a massive computational matrix. Around it, the city was dying, but Kelver continued its research even as the darkness closed in. "What did it find?" Alex asked. "That the Devourers aren't truly alive," Vex said. "They're parasites. They exist by feeding on the quantum resonance of conscious thought, specifically the neural patterns associated with empathy and emotional connection." The display showed complex wave patterns, the mathematical representations of consciousness itself. Alex could see how the Devourer feeding process worked. They latched onto empathic beings and slowly drained the very essence of what made them sentient. "But parasites have a weakness," Alex said, understanding beginning to dawn. "Exactly. They can be infected." Vex activated another sequence, showing Kelver's final experiment. The Veth discovered that the Devourer's feeding mechanism can be reversed. Instead of draining empathy, it can be forced to transmit it. The implications hit Alex like a physical blow. "You're talking about weaponizing empathy itself." "Yes, but the cost," Vex's voice faltered. "The being who initiates the process becomes a conduit. They experience every death, every moment of terror, every instance of suffering that the Devourers have ever caused. Across millions of years, across countless civilizations." The Archive's walls trembled as the Devourer ships began their assault on the planet's surface. Through the transparent barrier, Alex could see beams of absolute darkness carving through the crystalline formations like a knife through paper. "How many civilizations have they destroyed?" Alex asked quietly. "Thousands. Maybe tens of thousands." Vex pulled up a galactic map, showing the void spaces where star systems once thrived. each one containing billions of sentient beings. Alex stared at the map, trying to comprehend the scale of suffering the Devourers had caused. The number was beyond human understanding, beyond any capacity for processing grief. The Veth couldn't do it, Vex continued. Even facing extinction, they couldn't accept that level of psychic trauma. They chose to die as themselves rather than live with the weight of all that pain. But humans are different, Alex said, the words coming out before he fully understood what he was saying. Your species has a unique relationship with sacrifice. Vex agreed. You routinely accept personal suffering to prevent the suffering of others. But this would be accepting the suffering of entire galaxies. The ground shook violently as one of the Devourer ships landed nearby. Through the archives, sensors, Alex could see dark shapes moving across the crystalline landscape, searching for them with predatory patience. How long do we have? Alex asked. Minutes, maybe less. Vex began downloading data from the archive onto a portable storage device. The process requires specific quantum resonance patterns. It can only be initiated from inside a Devourer command vessel, so I'd have to let them capture me. Yes, and then in the moments before they begin feeding, you would need to reverse the polarity of their consciousness-draining apparatus. Vex handed Alex the data storage device. The technical specifications are all here, but Alex, if you do this, you won't survive. The psychic feedback will destroy your mind. Alex looked at the device in his hands, feeling its weight. Such a small thing to carry the salvation or damnation of an entire species. There's something else, Vex said reluctantly. The empathic transmission won't just affect the Devourers. It will spread to every sentient being in the galaxy. Every species will suddenly experience true empathy, the ability to feel the pain and joy of every other conscious creature. What would that mean? It would end war, end cruelty, end the ability to cause suffering without experiencing it yourself. Vex's expression was grave, but it would also end the independence of individual consciousness. Every being would be connected to every other being. Privacy, individuality, the right to make selfish choices, all of that would cease to exist. The archive's defenses finally failed, and the wall began to dissolve under the Devourer's touch. Alex could see them now, tall, impossibly thin figures wrapped in darkness, their faces hidden behind masks that seemed to absorb light itself. You're asking me to choose between the extinction of humanity and the fundamental transformation of all consciousness in the galaxy, Alex said. I'm not asking you to choose anything, Vex replied. I'm simply giving you the option that the Veth couldn't take. The Devourers entered the archive, moving with fluid grace toward the chamber where Alex and Vex waited. Their presence seemed to drain warmth from the air itself. Alex closed his eyes, feeling the weight of billions of lives in his hands. When he opened them again, his decision was made. The Devourer command ship was a cathedral of darkness, its corridors stretching into infinity like the space between stars. Alex walked through passages that seemed to bend reality itself, escorted by silent figures whose touch left frost on the walls. They had taken him without resistance. When the Devourers entered the archive, Alex had simply stepped forward, hands raised, and allowed them to place their consciousness-draining restraints around his wrists. Vex had watched in horror as the dark beings led the human cadet away, but Alex had given the Altarian a final nod, a promise that he understood what needed to be done now. Deep in the heart of the alien vessel, Alex was beginning to understand the true scope of the Devourer's nature. The ship wasn't just a vehicle, it was a living extension of their collective consciousness, grown rather than built, shaped by millennia of consumed thoughts and dreams. The walls pulsed with organic rhythms, and Alex could hear whispers in languages that belonged to extinct species. The Mordani clicking songs of the outer spiral, the harmonic resonance of the celestial wails, the mathematical poetry of the calculation beings of Andromeda Prime, all of it trapped, preserved in the ship's living memory. Do you understand? Now, the voice came from everywhere and nowhere, a collective consciousness speaking through the ship itself. We do not destroy, we preserve. Every thought, every feeling, every moment of beauty and terror, we keep it all. Alex forced himself to remain calm, even as the restraint sent tendrils of cold energy through his nervous system. The Devourers were already beginning their feeding process, sampling his consciousness like a vintner testing wine. You preserve it by stealing it, Alex said. You murder entire civilizations and call it conservation. Murder? The ship's laughter was the sound of dying stars. We give eternal life. Every being we consume becomes part of us. They achieve immortality. Alex was led into a vast chamber at the ship's heart, where thousands of containment pods lined the walls in perfect geometric patterns. Each pod contained a different species beings from across the galaxy, suspended in a state between life and death, their consciousness slowly being drained to feed the Devourer collective. At the center of the chamber stood the apparatus that Veth had described, a massive structure that looked like a twisted tree, its branches reaching toward each containment pod. Energy flowed through the branches like dark sap, carrying the stolen thoughts and emotions of countless civilizations. The empathy engine, Alex whispered, recognizing it from the archive's files. Your species has such crude names for beautiful things, the collective voice said. We call it the Eternal Garden. Here, consciousness blooms forever. They secured Alex to a new pod, one clearly designed for human physiology. As the restraints tightened around him, he felt the first tendrils of the feeding process beginning to probe his mind. The sensation was indescribable, like having his soul slowly unraveled, thread by thread. Your empathy is particularly rich, the voice continued. Most species develop emotional connections only to their own kind. But humans, you feel for everything, even us. Alex gasped as the probing deepened. The Devourers were right even now, as they prepared to drain his consciousness. He could feel their ancient loneliness, their desperate need to connect with other minds. They weren't evil in any traditional sense. They were simply alien beyond human comprehension, trying to preserve beauty in the only way they understood. You were once like us, weren't you? Alex said, understanding flooding through him. You were an empathic species. That's why you can feed on empathy. You remember what it felt like. The feeding process paused. For a moment, the ship's whispers fell silent. We were the first, the voice admitted. Billions of years ago, when the galaxy was young, we felt the pain of every living thing, and it nearly destroyed us. So we chose to consume rather than feel, to preserve rather than experience. Alex reached into his pocket with trembling fingers, retrieving the data storage device Vex had given him. The Devourer's attention was focused on his surface thoughts. They hadn't detected the deeper plan he was concealing beneath layers of genuine empathy and terror. But you're still in pain, Alex said, connecting the device to the pod's interface. All this time, all these civilizations you've preserved, you still feel empty inside. Silence. The feeding process resumed with violent intensity, and Alex screamed as his consciousness was torn open like a flower in a hurricane. But even as his mind was being dissected, he managed to activate the device. The technical specifications flowed into the ship's systems, disguised as random neural static. The Veth's final gift, a virus written in the language of consciousness itself, designed to reverse the polarity of the empathy engine. What have you done? The collective voice was no longer confident, no longer in control. I've given you what you've always wanted, Alex gasped, his vision blurring as the device completed its upload. True connection, real empathy. Not the preserved memories of dead civilizations, but living, breathing, sharing consciousness. The empathy engine began to change. The dark energy flowing through its branches flickered, wavered, and then reversed direction. Instead of drawing consciousness from the containment pods, it began broadcasting it, sending the accumulated empathy of millions of civilizations back out into the galaxy. No. The ship convulsed as the collective consciousness realized. What was happening? We cannot feel. We chose not to feel. But it was too late. The reversed engine was already transmitting the full spectrum of empathic experience to every devourer ship in the galaxy. They were experiencing, all at once, every moment of suffering they had ever caused. Every death, every extinction, every civilization reduced to whispers in the dark. And more than that, they were feeling it as their victims had felt it. The terror of the Veth as their cities fell. The desperate love of parent Mordani trying to protect their young. The cosmic loneliness of the last celestial whale singing into the void. Alex felt it too. As the conduit for the transmission, he experienced not just a devourer's pain, but the pain of every being they had ever consumed. Billions of years of suffering crashed through his consciousness like a tsunami of pure anguish. But underneath the pain, he felt something else, something the devourers had forgotten in their eons of isolation. Hope, love, the fierce joy of beings who chose to care for each other despite the cost. The containment pods began to open as the engine's reversal freed their prisoners. Across the galaxy, on every devourer ship, the same process was beginning. The preserved consciousnesses were being returned to their bodies, and the devourers themselves were remembering what it meant to truly feel. Alex's vision went white as the psychic feedback reached its peak. In his final moments of consciousness, he heard a sound that hadn't been heard in the galaxy for millions of years. The devourers were crying. Alex Morgan died at exactly 14 minutes past 0700 hours. Ship time. His body drained by the psychic feedback of the reversed empathy engine simply could not contain the weight of a galaxy's worth of consciousness. But his death was not an ending. It was a transformation that rippled across the cosmos like the first light of dawn on the Devourer command ship. The beings who had once been humanity's greatest threat knelt beside Alex's still form, their ancient faces wet with tears they had not shed for eons. They could feel everything now, not just the pain they had caused, but the love that had motivated Alex's sacrifice, the hope that had driven him to choose the galaxy's salvation over his own survival. He felt our loneliness, whispered the being who had once been the collective voice. Even as we prepared to consume him, he felt our pain. Across the galaxy, the transformation was accelerating. Every sentient being touched by the empathic transmission was experiencing the same expansion of consciousness that had once made humanity unique. The proud Caraxians laid down their weapons as they felt their enemies' fear. The isolationist Nephians reached out to other species with new understanding. The calculating Zephirites wept for the first time in their recorded history. Commander Vex stood in the ruins of the Academy, watching as Devourer ships throughout the system began to change. Their dark hulls were becoming transparent, revealing the countless preserved beings within. As the consciousnesses trapped inside were freed and returned to life, the ships themselves were transforming from instruments of consumption into vessels of restoration. The first ship to complete its transformation landed gently on the Academy's damaged hull. The beings who emerged were no longer the terrifying devourers of legend. They were simply ancient, tired creatures who had finally remembered how to feel. Their leader, a tall figure whose face was both alien and achingly familiar, approached Vex with hesitant steps. "We have caused so much pain," the former devourer said, its voice carrying the weight of geological ages. "We do not expect forgiveness." "Forgiveness isn't mine to give," Vex replied, "but understanding might be possible." The Academy's survivors, members of 17 different species, watched in amazement as the Devourers began the work of restoration. Using technology beyond current galactic understanding, they began rebuilding the damaged station, returning the dead to life, healing wounds that had seemed beyond repair. But the real changes were happening on a deeper level. The empathic transmission had created permanent neural pathways between different species, allowing for a level of communication and understanding that had never existed before. War didn't end overnight. Generations of conditioning couldn't be erased in moments, but the foundation for lasting peace had been laid on Earth. Humanity's leaders struggled to understand what had happened. Reports were flooding in from across. Human space contact with alien species was no longer fraught with misunderstanding and conflict. Instead, human diplomats found themselves able to literally feel the emotions and intentions of their alien counterparts, making deception impossible and trust inevitable. The former devourers took on the role of gardeners, using their vast knowledge to nurture the empathic connections that were forming between species. They shared the preserved memories of extinct civilizations, allowing the galaxy to learn from the wisdom of those who had come before. On the crystalline world where the archive still stood, a monument was erected to Alex Morgan. It bore no grand inscription, no flowery eulogy, simply the words, "He chose to feel, years past." The galaxy didn't become a utopia. Suffering still existed. Conflict still arose. Beings still made selfish choices. But they did so with full knowledge of the consequences, full awareness of the pain their actions might cause others. The result was a gradual but steady increase in cooperation, understanding, and mutual support between species. The former devourers integrated slowly into galactic society, their ancient knowledge proving invaluable in solving problems that had plagued civilizations for millennia. They established schools where young beings from different species could learn to navigate their new empathic abilities, teaching them to maintain individual identity while remaining connected to the greater consciousness of the galaxy. Commander Vex, now promoted to Admiral, often visited Alex's monument. Standing before the simple stone, he would remember the young human cadet who had made an impossible choice, not because he was certain it was right, but because he couldn't bear to let others suffer when he had the power to help. "You would be amazed by what you started," Vex would say to the monument. "The galaxy is becoming something new, something better, and it's because one human chose to care." The monument never answered, of course. But sometimes, when the crystalline formations caught the light just right, Vex could swear he felt a presence, a warmth that reminded him of the moment when Alex had stepped forward to face the devourers, knowing he would die but hoping others might live. In the end, that was humanity's gift to the galaxy. Not superior technology or military might, but the simple, revolutionary idea that caring for others, even at great personal cost, was not a weakness to be overcome, but a strength to be celebrated. The species that had once vanished were gone forever, their civilizations lost to time. But their memory lived on in the empathic network that connected all conscious beings, a reminder that every individual consciousness was precious, every life worth preserving. And in the schools where young beings learned to navigate their new abilities, human instructors taught the most important lesson of all, that true strength came not from the ability to inflict pain, but from the courage to feel it and to choose compassion anyway. The galaxy had learned to feel, and in learning to feel, it had learned to heal.